Did you know that police once interrogated a shooting victim for 6 hours without realizing he had 2 bullets lodged in his brain? This is the heartbreaking and infuriating story of Ryan Waller, a case that exposes one of the worst examples of police misconduct in modern American history. December 23, 2006, Phoenix, Arizona. It's 2 days before Christmas, and 18-year-old Ryan Waller is at home with his girlfriend of 8 months, 21-year-old Heather Quan. They're excited about the holidays, planning to spend time with family. But their Christmas celebration would never come. That evening, there was a knock at the door. Ryan answered and recognized 2 men, Richie Carver, who used to live in the apartment, and his father, Larry Carver. The men forced their way inside. Without warning, Richie Carver raised a gun and shot Ryan twice in the head at point-blank range, leaving him crumpled in the doorway. The Carvers then walked into the living room where Heather sat on the couch. They shot her dead. She was killed simply because she was a witness. The father and son then ransacked the apartment, stealing weapons, electronics, and a guitar before fleeing the scene. They left Ryan for dead, but against all odds, Ryan Waller was still alive. When Ryan didn't show up for Christmas dinner on December 25th, his parents grew worried. They drove to his apartment and knocked on the door. No answer. They peered through the window and saw something that made their blood run cold. A body on the couch. They immediately called the police. When officers arrived, they discovered Heather's lifeless body in the living room. And then they found Ryan, stumbling around the apartment, alive but severely disoriented. His face was grotesquely swollen and bruised, turned completely black from the trauma. One eye was nearly swollen shut. You would think that seeing someone in this condition, medical personnel would be called immediately. But that's not what happened. Instead of rushing Ryan to a hospital, police assumed he was the prime suspect in Heather's murder. They believed this was a case of domestic violence gone wrong. Ryan was placed in a police car where he sat for 4 hours. Then he was brought into an interrogation room where Detective Paul Dalton questioned him for another 2 hours. The interrogation video is disturbing and has since become infamous online. Ryan is clearly suffering from a catastrophic brain injury. He can barely keep his eyes open. He keeps asking to go to sleep, a classic sign of severe concussion. His face is covered in horrific black bruises. He moans in pain throughout the questioning. Detective Dalton asks him basic questions. What's your girlfriend's last name? Ryan can't remember. Did you graduate high school? Ryan doesn't know. How did you get those injuries on your face? Ryan gives confused, contradictory answers. At one point, Ryan says people came over and shot them with arrows and bows and darts. Then he corrects himself and says they had revolvers. His answers make no sense because his brain is literally bleeding inside his skull. When Detective Dalton tells Ryan that Heather is dead, Ryan seems genuinely shocked. She's dead? Because of his injuries, Ryan appears to have no short-term memory of the last few days. Despite his severe confusion, Ryan manages to identify his attackers, Richie Carver and his father. But the detective seems skeptical of Ryan's story, continuing to treat him as a suspect rather than a victim. When medical personnel examine Ryan, they make a horrifying discovery. He has 2 bullet wounds in his head. Bullets are still lodged in his brain. He's been sitting in interrogation, slowly dying, while police questioned him about a murder he didn't commit. Ryan was rushed to the hospital where he underwent emergency brain surgery. But the damage was already done. The delay in treatment caused catastrophic and irreversible injuries. Ryan Waller spent 35 days in the hospital. When he was finally released, he was not the same person. The gunshot wounds and delayed treatment left him with permanent brain damage. He suffered from seizures, vision problems, memory loss, and severe physical disabilities. He required around-the-clock care. For nearly 10 years, Ryan struggled with his new reality. Then, on January 20th, 2016, Ryan was shopping in a grocery store when he suffered a massive seizure. He fell, hit his head, and bled out before help could arrive. He was just 27 years old. Ryan's death was a direct result of the shooting and the delayed medical treatment he received that night in 2006. Richie Carver was arrested first and convicted in June 2008. His father, Larry Carver, initially escaped justice. He fled to California after the crime, taking the murder weapon with him. His wife, Cheryl, told investigators that Larry had confessed to her, but she later invoked spousal privilege and refused to testify against her husband. This led to Larry's initial acquittal. Heather's family was devastated. They successfully lobbied the Arizona legislature to change the law. The result was Heather's Law, which amended the marital privilege statute to compel a defendant's spouse to testify in murder cases. With this new law in place, Larry Carver was retried and convicted. In January 2013, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. They argued that the police's failure to provide timely medical care directly caused Ryan's permanent injuries and contributed to his eventual death. The family spent 4 years preparing for trial, gathering evidence, and fighting for justice. But just 3 weeks before the trial was set to begin, a judge dismissed the lawsuit. The family never got their day in court. No officers were disciplined. No one was held accountable for the 6-hour delay that destroyed Ryan's life. Ryan Waller's story is a tragedy on every level. A young man with his whole life ahead of him was shot defending his home. His girlfriend was murdered. He survived against impossible odds, only to be treated as a criminal instead of a victim. The delay in medical care caused irreversible damage that ultimately killed him 10 years later. This case raises serious questions about police training, accountability, and the treatment of crime victims. How could trained detectives not recognize a gunshot wound to the head? The Waller family continues to share Ryan's story, hoping to prevent similar tragedies. They want police departments across the country to learn from this case and implement better protocols for identifying and treating injured victims. Ryan Waller deserved better, Heather Quan deserved better, and their families deserve justice that they never received. If you found this story as disturbing as I did, please share it. Rest in peace, Ryan Waller and Heather Quan.